After getting fired from his job and broke up with his fiancée, a loser reporter emerged with a parasite by luck, and they both stopped a greedy scientist from destroying the world. Hello, and welcome again to our channel. Today we're gonna recap one of the best 2018 movies, known for Venom. It's one of Marvel movies, by the way. It's just part 1 of this series, so stay tuned for the next part. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe the channel to get more videos like this one. Our movie started far away at Malaysia, where a strange spaceship fallen there. The spaceship unfortunately had some living species on it. According to the organization that owns this spaceship, Carlton Drake, their CEO, said that they had 4 living species over there. Luckily, they found 3 of them, but the 4th is still missing. Malaysian police went to the incident location, trying to save everybody was there. They found 1 man still alive, but they didn't know that he got infected by the missing species, which dominated his body. So while the police officer took this guy in an ambulance, he turned to a monster, killing her and taking her same shape, so no one would ever doubt him. Back again to US. We meet with Eddie ... who lives with his beloved fiancée Anne. Eddie wasn't a good reporter at all. His boss was always blaming him. His last chance was to make a quick interview with Carlton Drake, who is his fiancée's boss. Jack told Eddie that it will be his last chance. If he didn't act he can consider himself fired. At the same night, Anne knew about this interview. She spent the whole night asking Eddie to be polite during the interview, even if Drake is not a good person. Anne was Drake's organization lawyer, so she didn't want her fiancé to mess up her career. When they both went back home, Eddie couldn't sleep, so he tried to get some fresh air, but suddenly looked at Anne's laptop with a mail from Drake organization. Eddie got curious. The mail was confidential, so he hoped it will help him with the interview. At this mail, Drake was asking Anne to defend them in court, cause 3 of the subjects they were testing died, and Drake didn't want his name to be mentioned. That triggered Eddie even more. Next day, Eddie went to meet Drake. There, Drake was busy with some kids, as he tries to act as a good person, and always saying his organization is helpful to society. Later, when he knew Eddie was there, he went to meet him, and as usual, Eddie tried to be polite, but in fact, Eddie was setting him a trap. At the beginning of the interview, Eddie asked Drake to open up and talk about his past, and then they will talk about his organization's new invention. Drake said that he always liked the medical fields, so he decided to put all his investments in this industry. Eddie acted like he is a big fan, started to talk about the organization's new invention, but suddenly he asked Drake about his weird experiments, whether the subject, who is human being, knew they might die or not, and if he used particular type of people, the weak one, poor one. Eddie added that he knew about the 3 guys who died in these experiments, which he saw yesterday on Anne's laptop. Drake immediately ends the interview, asking his guards to take Eddie out. Eddie went back to Jack, who had phone calls from Drake ... threatening him if anyone watched this interview, he will destroy his whole channel. So Jack was running out of options and decided to fire Eddie, cause Drake is so powerful and he didn't want any trouble. Jack wasn't Eddie's real problem, cause after this interview, Drake fired Anne. Drake accused her of leaking his confidential mail ... to her fiancé so he can make a good interview. Once Eddie met Anne again, she told him that he is a careless person, unfaithful as he opened her mail, yet not mature enough to stay with him, so she broke up with Eddie. And like this, Eddie was left in the street, without a job, without a fiancé, and without any future plans. We go back to Malaysia, where the police officer, who is basically hosting some sort of parasite inside her, still walking in the streets. No one notices any differing, but once she got hungry, she turned into a crazy creature, kept killing anyone tried to stop her, and once again, that parasite turned into another host, taking also his shape. 6 months later in US, Drake was still working on his experiments, this time with Dr. Dora. The main topic Drake was studying is how to get a parasite to live on Earth. After a couple of experiments, somehow a rabbit could handle the parasite, but later then, the rabbit couldn't handle it anymore. Hence, Drake knew the real theory. To get a parasite to live on Earth, all you need is a suitable host who can handle this parasite. Dr. Dora didn't accept this, as it is unethical, but Drake ignored her opinion, and yet asked her to find a human for this test. He didn't want to use rabbits anymore. Back to Eddie, who was spending most of his time drunk. He was trying to escape from his life at the bar. But even there, one day Drake was on every single channel, showing off his sacrifices, which got Eddie angry. He was literally watching the guy who destroyed his life. So Eddie started to curse Drake, telling everybody he is a big liar and not a good person as he claimed. And when no one believed him, he left the bar and went away. Later then, Eddie went to a nearby store, tried to get some stuff for himself. But suddenly, an armed guy entered the place, threatened Mrs. Chen to kill her if she didn't give him all her money. Eddie hid behind a shelf and ran away from the place. He couldn't even help his friend, Mrs. Chen. When Eddie went back home, he started to call everybody he knew, trying to get himself a job. But as you know, Drake was so powerful, so he ordered all the channels not to hire Eddie. Eddie. Eddie's new apartment was in a very local place, with a huge number of neighbors. One of them was a musician who used to play music so loudly, Eddie couldn't even sleep with it. He was missing his old fancy life, but that was a past for him, and he forced himself to sleep, covering his ears with a pillow. While Eddie was suffering, Drake's organization was working really well. He forced people to get him a subject, this time a human subject. He was willing to test his body, if he can host the parasite or not. His first choice was a guy named Isaac. Drake was targeting poor people who accepts to do anything for some money, and so was Isaac, who entered the room, where he will be exposed to the parasite. At the beginning, Isaac could handle it, but suddenly he shows weird symptoms, fell to the ground, and then the parasite killed him. Dr. Dora didn't like what she saw. That was 100% unethical. They killed a man, just to make an experiment. While Dr. Dora was still shocked, Drake ordered his men to find him another subject. He was willing to keep trying, until he found the right host. Then he can use him as a unique soldier, who will obey all his orders. Back again to poor Eddie. He went to Mrs. Chen's store as usual, but he felt that someone is watching him, so he tried again to hide. He didn't want any more troubles. He can now barely live. So Eddie decided to hide inside Chen's store, but he was shocked when he saw his stalker. She was Dr. Dora. Once Eddie knew she is working for Drake, he refused to even listen to her, kept walking away. Dora told him he is a great reporter, and he was the only one to uncover Drake, showing his true intentions. But even though, Eddie refused to help her, saying he lost more than enough chasing this Drake, and he is not willing to lose even more. Eddie even gave Dr. Dora a piece of advice, to look for someone else to help her, and to look after herself, cause soon or later, Drake will know about her. Desperately, Dr. Dora gave Eddie her contact card, asking him to call her if under any circumstances he changed his mind. Later this night, Eddie saw Anne walking at her neighborhood. This time, she wasn't alone. She was walking with her new boyfriend, a guy called Dr. Dan. When Eddie tried to figure out what happened and how Anne could easily move on, Anne blamed him, saying all what happened is his fault and she doesn't want to talk to him anymore. That was a huge shock to Eddie, who kept walking through the streets, didn't know where to go. Finally, he found himself on a bridge where he can see Drake's organization. After a couple of minutes, Eddie decided to call Dr. Dora. What else he can lose? Absolutely nothing. Eddie asked Dr. Dora to let him in the organization, and he will try to take pictures of everything. She met him there, took him inside the organization using a secret door. When they are both inside, Dora started to explain everything to Eddie. Drake is a very bad guy. He found life outside the Earth, but the only creatures who could live there are parasites. So now Drake is performing experiments, trying to find the right host. Then he could find a link between parasites and human beings. When a security guard interrupted them, Dora tried to hide Eddie, but Eddie entered the lab, not knowing how dangerous things are. Eddie couldn't believe what he saw. A huge lab with number of containers. Inside each one of them, there is a human subject. Eddie started to take pictures immediately, not knowing what exactly is going on. Suddenly, when he came closer to one container, he saw Mary. An old woman used to sit beside Mrs. Chen's store. Eddie tried to help her while she was screaming, asking Eddie to open the container. So Eddie started to open it, trying to break the glass. But that had two main consequences. First of all, an alarm went on in the whole organization. But most important is, the glass got broken, and a parasite got out of the container, getting inside Eddie's body. Eddie didn't know exactly what happened. He just tried to escape from the organization, running as fast as he can, but a security guard tried to stop him. Eddie found himself much stronger. He managed to beat them easily. Not just beating them, Eddie could break the door with his bare hands. Guards continued to chase him, so he kept running so fast. When he was almost caught, he climbed a huge tree, just in a couple of seconds. After all of the guards went back to the organization, Eddie went back home, not knowing exactly what is going on. He found himself hungry, that he ate almost everything in the house, even the leftovers from the garbage. While Eddie was experiencing these weird symptoms, Drake found out what happened in his organization. He asked Dora what happened, but for sure she acted like she didn't know. Drake looked to the bright side. Now his parasite found the right host, and he is still alive. So he wanted to find this host, no matter what. At this night, after knowing that the parasite can finally find a host, Drake decided to make the same experiment again. Surprisingly, the experiment succeeded, and the subject was still alive, in a steady case. On the other hand, Eddie was still figuring out what happened to him. He tried to call Dora and Anne, but they both ignored him, so he went out into the streets, running while calling anyone to help him. But suddenly, he heard an inside voice. The voice was so clear, and asked him to go eat right now. So Eddie went to the nearest restaurant, where Dan and Anne were dating, sitting in peace. But Eddie started to eat like he never saw food before, embarrassing Anne and Dan. Just after finishing the food, the voice was still asking him to eat more, especially living things. So Eddie went to a sink that is full of living sea animals, and started eating them before anyone hit Eddie. Dan said he is a doctor, and Eddie is his patient, so he will take good care of him. Just after that, Dan took Eddie with him to the hospital. He wanted to know why he acting like this. Eddie went to an MRI test, where he will be exposed to magnetic rays, but the test fails. As the rays got the parasite angry, that was his only weak point, so the test fails. And Dan blamed it on Eddie, saying he has a confined spaces phobia. Later this night, Drake was still believing in his last subject, but unfortunately to him, even this subject was dying. And Drake couldn't help him. Back again to Eddie, who went back home, trying to get some rest. But his noisy neighbor was playing music loudly. So politely, Eddie asked him to lower the music. At the beginning, the guy refused, saying it's his own house. But then, the parasite itself was taking, and the guy was terrified. So he shut down the music. Just to be clear about Eddie's case, he is now hosting a parasite, which gives him superpower. That makes him very powerful. In Drake's organization, Drake could find out that Dora is the one who brought the stranger to his organization. So he told her, trying to make her trust him. He said it's great news to him, that somewhere there is a suitable host. The only thing he needs to know, who the hell is this host? Dora freaked out, knowing she has no any options but to tell Drake exactly what happened. So Dora told Drake it was Eddie who entered the lab. Then somehow he could escape. So Drake killed Dora, then asked his guards to find Eddie and bring him to him. Eddie was staying at his house. Then suddenly the guards entered. They asked him to go with them, otherwise they will use their guns. So the parasite overridden Eddie's powers and started to fight them alone. He could easily get rid of them, as he can expand his hand. After he get rid of them, the parasite wanted to eat their head, as the best meal to him is a fresh human brain. But of course, Eddie denied and jumped out of the window. So Drake's driver saw him, then called Drake, telling him what happened. Drake was happier than ever. His experiment succeeded. Then he asked the new doctor, who took over after Dora's death, to follow this experiment and get him a new suitable subject. On the other hand, Eddie was exhausted, couldn't even believe what he did. He took away a punch of well-trained guards. The chase wasn't over. Drake's driver started to chase Eddie, who wanted to escape using a motorcycle. But as usual, the parasite overridden again. He started to drive, passing any obstacles. While Eddie was afraid, the parasite managed to run away in a very dangerous way. When Eddie thought he got rid of Drake's soldiers, a car hit him powerfully, throwing him out of the motorcycle. While Drake's soldier and police officers tried to catch Eddie for the first time, Eddie and the parasite united together, making a huge immune monster. Just before escaping, Eddie hit Drake's soldier, then ran away from the police. Eddie was running on the top of police cars. Then he jumped into a lake to disappear from police sights. Just after that, Eddie woke up, still not believing what happened. He now got new powers and knew many enemies. Even more, he fought the police out of the lake. The parasite got out of Eddie's body, so they both can start a conversation. The parasite, which called itself Venom, told Eddie he is the right host, and together, no one can beat them. Eddie was frightened to see the parasite, so he couldn't refuse anything. But knowing that Venom's enemy is Drake, they both found a new mission. In the US, the missing parasite from Malaysia just landed in the shape of a young girl. That means Venom can face a new enemy. An enemy can beat him. Dan was still waiting for Eddie's MRI results. He thought that Eddie was fine and just having bad time as he lost his job and girlfriend. But when he read the results, he called Ann ... asking her to bring him Eddie as soon as possible, cause he has some sort of disease which destroy his organs. Ann, who was still love Eddie, called him many times, but Eddie didn't pick up. Eddie now has a new mission to get rid of Drake. At this time, Drake was blinded by his experiments. He tried more subjects over and over, but the last subject was killed. Not just the subject, but the parasite also was killed. So as much as Drake knows, the only parasite that is left is Venom, not knowing about the Malaysian one. Eddie focused on his mission, so he went to his former company with every single evidence about Drake's organization with him. He tried to enter, but the guard refused, so Venom, overridden the powers, jumped over the company, managed to succeed despite the problems he faced when a plan passed near him, and Eddie left the evidence on Jack's desk. On their way down, Eddie refused to jump again, as they could die the last time, so he wanted to use the elevator. But just then, police officers surrounded Eddie, trying to force him to surrender. But Eddie, and for the first time, asked Venom to take over, and that was a very easy mission, as Venom could beat them all without even get touched. Venom is basically immune against bullets. That's what the officers knew, so they started to use grenades, which causes some troubles to Venom, who decided to take his own revenge. At this time, Ann knew that Eddie is in the building, so she went there to help him, but she was surprised by what she saw. Venom was literally playing with the police officers, eating their heads off. But once Eddie saw Ann over there, he took over again and chased Ann, who was running away, after explaining himself, saying he doesn't even know what is happening to him. Ann offered him a ride to the hospital, so Eddie accepted. In the car, Venom talked to Ann, telling her he is a parasite, and finally found his right host. He wasn't willing to leave. The young girl who was hosting the parasite headed to Drake's organization, killing of course anyone who tried to stop her. Finally, Drake walked to her, so the parasite moved to his body. body, hosting the parasite himself. Drake turned to a killing machine, not to forget his bad intentions. At the hospital, Dan told Eddie about his real case. He is hosting a parasite, and this parasite is feeding on his organs, so it's a matter of time till he will die, and the parasite will find another host. After hearing this, Anne started to beg Venom to leave Eddie's body, but Venom refused, so Dan repeated the MRI, which forced Venom to leave Eddie's body. They then kept Venom in a container while Eddie was finally free, and no one is eating his organs. What they didn't know is that Venom managed to escape, and now he will find another host. This time the host was a dog. Drake's men went again to Eddie's place. This time he was weak without Venom, so they catch them easily, then took him to Drake. Drake showed off his own parasite, who is just evil like him, and his name is Riot. Riot is the parasite's leader. He made a deal with Drake. They both will live together and leading this land. Eddie wasn't interested. He told Drake that he got rid of Venom, and now he is just a human, so Drake asked his soldiers to kill him. Soldiers took Eddie inside the woods, but just before killing him, Anne entered the place. Anne this time was Venom's new host, so Venom again took over, killed all of Drake's soldiers. This time he ate their brains again, which made him stronger. After that, Eddie thanks Anne for saving him, so they both kissed each other's, while Venom took the advantage and moved back into Eddie's body. Venom told Eddie about Drake's plan. Now, as he has Riot on his side, Riot is a leader, so Drake will send a spaceship to bring him more parasites, and as Drake knew how to host parasites, they will both destroy the planet. Venom was right. As they were talking, Drake was ready to launch his first spaceship, so Venom asked Eddie to move faster, so they could beat Drake. Eddie wasn't sure why Venom was helping him, and why Venom is trying his best to beat Drake. Venom opened up to Eddie. He told him that on their planet, parasites such as Riot are the leaders, while he is nothing. No one even knows him over there, just like Eddie. Venom was a loser, trying to prove himself. That makes stronger bonds between them. Drake launched his first spaceship and took Riot to fight against Venom. Riot was much stronger than him, but Venom tried his best to beat him. They both engaged in a very brutal fight. Venom couldn't beat Riot, but Anne was there, and she had a better plan. She loudly turned on the speaker, so the rays separated Venom and Riot, and now it's a fight between Eddie and Drake. Eddie for sure was stronger than him, so he beat the hell out of him, but Riot managed to stab Eddie from the back, just before Eddie fall to the ground. Venom went back again, and he managed to heal Eddie. Just after that, Venom flied to the spaceship and destroyed it with both Drake and Riot inside it. Eddie fell to the lake again, thinking Venom was killed during the fire. Days later, the scene moved to Eddie. Who is sitting with Anne in the street. Anne was so sure that Venom was killed. She told Eddie she still loved him, but no one should know about it, not even Dan. What she didn't know is Venom is still alive, and Eddie still hosting him, but this time under clear conditions. They will only fight bad people, and Venom can eat their head. On his way back home, Eddie passed by Mrs. Chen's store, trying to get some stuff, but again the same robbery happened. This time Venom was there. It get rid of thieves, fighting their head as a reward, and just like this, Eddie and Venom went back to each other, and this time no one else knows. The end. Eddie is trying again to be a famous journalist, so he interviewed the most dangerous criminal in the US, and by mistake, he turned him into a lethal weapon. Hello, and welcome again. Today we're gonna recap a 2021 movie called Carnage, Let There Be Carnage. That is a second part of Venom movies. If you didn't watch the first one, all you need is to check it on our channel. So now let's start our recap. The movie begins in the past, on 1996 at Saint Estes Reform School, the place that had odd people, mostly criminals with very brutal crimes. Two of them were the couple, Cletus, one of the most dangerous serial killers, and Frances, his beloved girlfriend. One day, Cletus saw Frances crying. He then knew that she had superpowers, and this school is only for criminals, so she was scared that they would separate them and take her out of this place to another place. Cletus tried to reassure her, saying he would never let this happen, but he wasn't so sure. Cause, just in a couple of minutes, prison guards came to take her. While they both were crying, screaming and threatening the guards, Cletus wasn't a problem. He was powerless in this prison. Unlike Frances, whom screaming was so powerful, but the guards could handle her. Frances then was taken to a mental recovery organization where she would spend the rest of her life. Back again to the present day, Frances was still there, lost her eye, caused the guards shot her while she tried to fight back. There she couldn't use any of her powers, as she was under a lot of precautions, even though she was still dangerous. In order to torture her, they were showing her Cletus knew lose. He was sentenced to death, so he would never keep his promise to her and save her after all these years. Cletus only had one last wish: to talk face to face with Eddie, or as we know as Venom. Back again to Eddie, who is now a very famous and successful journalist, working for a well-known journal, heard about Cletus's story and how strong his love for Frances is. The police detective met Eddie, telling her that Cletus is a very dangerous guy who killed a lot of people, and they didn't even know where the bodies are, so they wanted Eddie to make this interview and try to find out where the dead bodies are. But the detective asked Eddie to be very careful. Eddie went to prison, where Cletus was waiting for him. Once Eddie started the interview, Cletus made a deal with him. He will tell him his life story with all the detail, which would make Eddie the most famous journalist. In return, he wanted him to put a headline that Cletus will choose. Eddie took the story from Cletus and put the headline exactly as Cletus wanted and took his whole life story. Eddie tried to be smart and get to know about the body's location, but he couldn't. Just before leaving, Eddie saw weird drawings on Cletus's cell walls. He memorized it without knowing what they exactly are. Just the day after, the interview was on the first page at the journals, and this particular journal went to Frances, as they used to punish her, forcing her to read Cletus's bad news. But this time, once Frances read the newspaper and the headlines, she knew it as a secret message, and her lover will finally come to rescue her, as he always promised. On the other hand, Eddie thought about the drawings, tried to redraw them, and he couldn't do so without Venom help. Eddie drew them again and again, trying to figure out what they really are. But finally, Venom had a great idea. They both draw the lines, and by searching for locations on internet, and they found a place that matches their lines, and Eddie knew it was the body's location. And after Eddie reported what he discovered, the police went to the place and found the bodies. What makes Eddie so famous again? He could discover a mystery police couldn't solve for 25 years, but things wasn't that good with Eddie. He had much troubles with Venom, who is always hungry, and as you know, he likes to eat human brains. So he wanted to find some criminals to eat their brains, but Eddie tried to convince him to eat chicken instead. Venom refused, claiming those chickens are his friends, and he doesn't want to stay home all day long. He even started to fight with Eddie, who went out to Mrs. Chen's store, trying to get Venom some chocolate to make him stop acting like this. But unfortunately, the shop ran out of chocolate. So Eddie went to the chicken farm to convince Venom to just eat chicken. But just then, they saw a thief. Only Eddie saw him as a thief. Venom saw him as a meal. So Venom started to chase him, while Eddie trying to stop him, till Eddie managed to stop Venom from eating the guy, which made Venom so mad. Venom started to fight with Eddie. They ran to the top of a building, where Eddie was about to fall to the ground, but Venom caught him at the last second. While Eddie was hanging, Anne gave him a call. She wanted to meet him again, as she feel like they could fix their relationship. Venom didn't seem to be convinced. He told Eddie she only want to get back to him, cause her boyfriend dumped her, but Eddie accepted to meet her. The next night, Eddie met Anne. They had dinner together, and as you know from the first part, she thinks that Eddie got rid of Venom. While Eddie thought it will be a date, Anne shocked him. She is about to get married, and for no reason. Both Eddie and Venom felt so sad, but Eddie said it's okay. He didn't want to let her see how hard he still loved her. Anne noticed that Eddie is deeply sad and confused. Wait, is he still having Venom? Anne asked him, but he denied. He said that Venom was dead and now he is free. But Anne could tell he was lying, so he started to talk to Venom. She asked him to take good care of Eddie. Once the date was over, Eddie let Venom drive, as he didn't feel well. His true love will be married to another guy. Venom understood his feelings, so it decides to help him. Kept Eddie busy, while Venom tried to cook for him. Of course, Venom wasn't a good chef. He was just putting any ingredients together, and the food looked terrible. While Eddie wasn't ready to eat, he was looking to this weird plate, and he didn't want to eat. So Venom decided to make things worse, as he poured coffee on him. After failing to make Venom happy, Venom brought him a mail that was so interesting. It was a weird letter from Cletus. He asked Eddie to attend his execution, as he will feel better if saw Eddie before died. Eddie was reading these letters while feeling bad. Cletus wrote his letters on old papers with weird drawings on it. Cletus wrote also about his first crime, as he killed his mother, his grandmother, and even his dog. Cletus blamed all his crimes on his father, who was always beating him while he was still a kid. That made Cletus a criminal. Cletus also wrote about his girlfriend Frances who he met at a local school, where everybody was also hitting him, but she was so kind to him, and since then, he loves her. The letter was so emotional, as Cletus opened up to Eddie, and as Eddie hadn't anything to do, he decided to go to meet Cletus again in the jail. When Eddie started the new interview with Cletus, Cletus told Eddie they both are the same. They are lonely men who never wishes to live like that. But now, the only thing Cletus was wishing for is to live alone the rest of his short life. Just after that, Eddie thought the interview was finished, but before he getting out of the jail, Cletus started to talk with Venom and not Eddie, till Venom got angry and decided to attack Cletus. Cletus was inside the cell, yet he managed to bite Eddie, taking a sample from his blood, the blood that contains Venom in it. Then the guards entered the room and separated the two guys. Later then, Venom got mad mad at Eddie. Venom claimed that he rescued Eddie many times, and he is the main reason for his success. Eddie disagreed with him, so they both started to fight together. Venom tried to throw Eddie out of the window, but Eddie could fight back, so Venom went out of his body and got into the first guy's body he met, leaving Eddie falling to the ground. He wanted to annoy Eddie, so he destroyed his vehicle, then went to another host body and kept moving away. The scene then turned to Cletus, who was about to get executed, and cause he is so dangerous. He was well tied to the bed. The priest asked him to say his last words, and as he had his last wish, they started to inject him with poison that would kill him in seconds. But after injecting him, Cletus didn't seem to be dead. His body started to react, and the officers ran away from the room. Cletus then turned into a giant Venom. What happened is the blood cells he took from Eddie, combined with the poison, gave him ultimate powers. Cletus then freed himself. He started to attack all the prison guards, killing them one by one. Then he freed all other prisoners. Cletus was really huge. Anyone saw him was terrified, and of course no one could stop him, so he escaped. At the same time, Eddie, who is now a normal person, was living his life, trying to fix his home after what Venom did to it. While Eddie was relaxing, watching TV, trying to forget about Venom and Anne, he watched the news. That told about Cletus. Eddie got annoyed. He didn't know what to do. He wasn't even sure if it is related to the bite. Just later that night, the detective knocked on his door and started to ask him about his interviews with Cletus. The detective suspects Eddie ... as he was the only one to meet Cletus at his last days. Eddie denies to know anything. He was having enough problems, and now he doesn't even has Venom anymore. The detective couldn't take any information out of Eddie, so he left his apartment, but told him not to leave the town without telling the police. Just after the detective left, Eddie wanted to know what exactly happened with Cletus, so he started to listen to the interview with Cletus. At the same time, Venom was moving from a host to another. Want to find the right host? Just after Eddie, Venom entered a cosplay party, so everyone thought that he wears a costume, and they admired his costume. So Venom partied with them, then left the party, while still thinking about Eddie. Back again to Cletus. He wanted to free his girlfriend Frances, and at the same time, the parasite inside him, which we will call Carnage ... wanted to kill Venom, so the two of them had a deal. On the other hand, Eddie decided to went behind Cletus's story on his own, so he went to the school Cletus said he was at. Eddie looked for any sign about Cletus, till he found his name initials with another girl, but no one can tell who the girl is. While Cletus was desperate to find his beloved Frances, she was still in prison, happy about the news that Saeed Cletus had escaped. Now she felt he would come to rescue her, but the doctor kept provoking her, saying no one could ever come here, and no one ever could beat the security. Just after she finished talking, Cletus showed up from behind the glass and immediately killed the doctor, then broke the glass cells, got his girlfriend free finally. They kissed and decided to fight the whole world together. Then both of them started to escape while the police was chasing them. Carnage took charge and kept throwing police cars, just like they are toys. Then the police officers started to shoot them, but for sure Carnage was bulletproof and he was taking care of the police officers. But then Frances decided to use her superpowers, which is her ultrasound voice. And as you know, parasites are so sensitive to these waves. Carnage was so mad at Frances. Her voice was so annoying, but he couldn't touch her, cause she is her boyfriend. At the same time, Eddie could collect the whole story's sides and knew that when Cletus bit him, he had a parasite inside him, and now he has superpowers. The only one Eddie was ready to talk to is his ex Anne, who just broke his heart, but still, he cannot trust anyone else. Eddie told her that Cletus now has a parasite inside him, and as he is a criminal, the parasite will be so dangerous and would kill anyone who would try to stop him. As she knew that no one would stop him, she remembered someone who can. Venom itself can do it. So she went to places Venom used to like, such as Mrs. Chen's store, where Venom used to eat chocolate, and as she thought, Venom was there inside Mrs. Chen's body, so she asked him to join her to help Eddie to escape. At the same time, Cletus decided to take his revenge from anyone who hurted him or Frances. First of all, he set his first school on fire and stayed there to see it. Then Cletus decided to kill the detective who arrested Frances. At the same time, Anne entered the police station while having Venom inside. Then she released Eddie while having a romantic moment. On the other hand, Cletus was chasing Eddie. He wanted to get Venom as he made the deal with Carnage. So he sent Frances to his house where she found Anne's picture. So they decided to kidnap her. And when Dan tried to stop them, they beat him and took her away. Just after this, Dan called Eddie telling him what happened. So they both decided to went after them together. Cletus after kidnapping Anne, decided to officially marry Francis ... So after all these years, they got their marriage at the church. As Dan heard which church they will make their ceremony, Eddie and Venom went there. They thought it would be an easy job. But once they interrupted the wedding, Cletus got mad at them. Then he started to bring out Carnage. Well, that wasn't exactly what they expected. They only expected a small parasite. But Carnage wasn't. Venom refused to get out, as Carnage is a red parasite, meaning he is much stronger than him. Eddie was in a very bad situation, so he begged Venom to get out, promised him to let him eat brains. Once Venom heard about the brains, he started to get out finally. Before the fight even begins, Francis showed off her powers, which annoys Carnage. That hit her, even though Cletus didn't like it. But of course, Carnage wouldn't let them leave, so there was no other option but to fight. So Carnage started to fight, punch Venom, who tried to defend himself, or at least get rid of Carnage. But Venom wasn't the only one who fight. We also had two other fights. Francis was trying to kill the detective, as he was the one who arrested her. Also, Cletus was trying to kill Eddie, cause Eddie never mentioned the problems that any criminal go through. The problem was that Francis always uses her sound, which affect both Venom and Carnage. So Carnage threatened her to kill her if she had done this again, and to get more power, Carnage ate the priest head and returned back to fight with Venom. Venom finally could fight Carnage, giving him hard time. So Carnage decided to change his plan. He took Anne with him to the top point at the church, while Venom was on the ground, under heavy blocks, can't even move. But at the same time, Carnage and Cletus were fighting together, as Cletus want to kill Francis, cause she is annoying him. When Venom saw that, he could wake up again and took a metal rod. That could hit Carnage with it, then saved Anne ... and not let her go, till she is safe at Dan's hands. But of course Carnage took the advantage and hit Venom strongly. That Venom wasn't able to walk, but then suddenly Francis came closer, so Venom hit her. So she screamed as usual. Before, died under the metal bell. When she screams, both Venom and Carnage got out of their hosts, and both Eddie and Cletus fell to the ground. But Anne, with the help of Venom, managed to save Eddie. Then Venom ate Carnage, leaving Cletus powerless. And as Eddie has to fulfill his promise, he let Venom eat Cletus's head. Later then, both Eddie and Venom went on vacation, far away from their hometown. Then something weird happened. They traveled to Spider-Man world. That originally happened. Cause a superhero called Dr. Strange open a gate that had a bug in it. Anyway, the point is, Venom saw Spider-Man, and for some reason, he felt like he should finish him. And that was preparing to introduce Venom in Spider-Man's next movies. The end.